Hi everyone. Hey, welcome, and I'm glad you're here today, and we're actually having a fun time. We're going to practice some, we're going to do a seascape in this video. And I guess on this video, I'm thinking we're going to sort of like see the simplicity of like a seascape where we can have a lot of fun with different colors and lots of water. We can use some rich, beautiful colors, kind of combine a whole lot of different ideas, but make it more of a simple style composition or painting. So I already have the painting here. I have the paper taped. So I always like to do this. You'll see on most of my videos, a lot of my videos, I like to put the tape on around the border of the paper. And this is great when we're finished with this composition or this small painting. We can peel off the tape and it looks great. It's almost like a finished painting. So we can, put it into a frame with a mat, or we could pin it up on the wall just as it is, maybe trim around some of the paper around the edges. I sometimes I'll make these smaller compositions on larger sheets of paper, and then when I'm finished I'll just trim the paper with some scissors around it and maybe leave a white border. Well, the tape gives us that white border, and then maybe I'll add a little more white border to it by putting it in the center of a larger sheet of paper. So you can adjust you can actually create your own mat on your paper, and I do that a lot. I use my paper as a mat so I don't have to worry about always picking up a mat for my paintings. That's just another little tidbit of ideas that I sometimes do when I'm creating a small painting or any size painting, really. So here we'll think about again our typical ideas. We're gonna do like a beach scene. We can have a photograph. We could work from books. We could work from a scene on our TVs, and we could freeze the TV or hit pause. Maybe there's all kinds of great stuff. I mean, today we're so lucky as artists, we get to use all kinds of great material to draw from for our painting. So here I'm just going to use a photograph from a book. So I might not be able to show the book in the photograph because that's copyright issues. So sometimes if you don't see me put up the photographs and things like that, it's because it might be a copyright problem where I can get my video taken down or deleted off of YouTube because I'm using someone else's material. So I don't want to do that. So, but there's just so much information out there online and in books and on TV and so forth that we can always draw from a lot of different places to get our ideas. So here I'm going to say, let's think of this as maybe like thirds. So we have maybe 1/3 here, 1/3 here, 1/3 here, and maybe our light source is going to be just up top like this. So we'll have our sunlight coming from this, so we could even make a little sunlight insignia versus like a lamp. And so when I think of this in thirds, I say, okay, so this is approximately a third. So I'm going to do a third here. I'm going to maybe do some water over here. And maybe some trees along the sand dunes here. And then maybe we'll have an interesting Now what's fun about doing like plants, plants, any kind of like things in nature, like flowers and plants, is you can be very free about it. You don't have to really get into the fine details of it, especially if it's something like out in like the woods or on the beach along the sand dunes and things. There's all kinds of interesting little plants, and we don't have to get tremendously into details, although you could if you wanted to. You could really sit down and study each of the plants and the way the angles of the let's say the branches and all that, which is good to study. I think everyone should do that a little bit. But if we're just doing a quick study like this, maybe if we're actually out here at the beach and we're painting, we're doing a really cool painting and we're all excited, we're out there, I have my stuff set up, and you know, I'm not going to really get extremely detailed. I'm going to be working quickly and probably trying to go to different locations maybe to get different, you know, paintings. And so with that idea, I'm not going to get really too, I'm just going to kind of get a feel for like some bushes and limbs and grass and twigs and weeds and, you know, all kinds of interesting things there. And then this will be the water, so we'll maybe have the ocean about like that. And then maybe here, this will be the hill coming down here. And then we'll have another so we'll sort of make the land like the sand and the lay of the land here, like sort of going on an angle this way, and then this over here, this sand dune over here comes down like so. So kind of an interesting few angles. And this is level across the ocean. And we'll keep it a real simple sky. And then maybe we'll have maybe a few grasses and things over here. And we'll keep it, you know, very simple. And then we're basically ready to paint. We're just getting down with our pencil the basic layout of the composition, and that's about all we need. And then we can get right in and start painting. So we'll use a round brush. This is a Da Vinci Kolinsky travel brush, number 8. And maybe we'll use I have my Alvaro Castanet needlepoint brush, which I'll use too. This is a number 8. So we use this for some of the fine details of the some of the grasses and things along the sand dunes here, and some finer details. And we should be good with our 2 brushes. And let's start in. We'll do our lighter washes first. So let's get in and we'll do some lighter washes. I already pre-mixed some interesting green here on my palette. This is peacock blue and yellow ochre mixed. And we'll see that it makes a really nice green for our plants and things along the sand dune here. Let's start out though with the light washes. First thing I'm going to do is get some water and fresh clean water, and I'm just going to put some fresh clean water on the watercolor paper. This is Arches satin paper, so it's the real smooth paper. Okay, and then we have and we're going to wet the paper with clean water, and we're going to get a nice diffused look with our watercolors here. Okay, so plenty of clean water. Then we'll take some cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Cobalt blue, cerulean blue. And we'll do some, you know, kind of that hit and miss look here. Let's not cover everything with color. Let's leave some whites in the sky here. That looks more interesting. This can be some clouds. And then we'll go into the water too. Just a couple lines in the water, because we're going to go back and do some darker washes in here once this dries a little bit. Okay, then we're going to use some of the same blue, cerulean blue, cobalt blue. Then we're going to mix a sand color. Let's go with some raw sienna, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. That makes a nice sand color, and then we'll mix in some blue with that too. Raw sienna. We want to stay light here though. This is going to be sand, so we want to keep a lighter wash, sand color. Alizarin crimson, maybe a little bit of cadmium orange. That should be pretty good. And we'll mix in some blue as well. So let's start that with I'm going to leave white of the paper here along this spot here. So pick one spot that you find you want to just leave white paper. That makes the sand look really, really bright. Let's do that. So we're going to leave that right here. We'll leave that completely white paper. You could also mark that lightly with a pencil and put a W there. And this way you definitely won't forget to do that. But we're working at a good pace here, and we're not going too fast, so we remember to do that. Okay, so we're doing the sand again. We'll put some blue in there too. And we mix around our brush strokes. And we can even, a little bit of that sand color we can put in the sky and the top edge of where the grass and twigs and leaves and the sand dune foliage is. It kind of helps to balance the painting a little more. We try to balance our paintings. Sometimes it looks good just to put a little bit of the sand and beach color, the sand color in the sky, just a little bit of it. That looks pretty good. All right, now since we're doing, I'm going to wait on the splashes. We're going to do some kind of fine speckles for sand to get that feeling of sand, but let's wait till this dries. And since I have a blow dryer here, I'm just going to do a quick, try to dry this a little bit. Okay, so now I dried that with a blow dryer, and I would say it's about probably like 75–80% dry. There's still a little bit of dampness in the paper, but that's no problem. It's not going to affect us too much. We're going to be going over with thicker paint now So usually if you're going to go over with thicker paint on top of a first wash, you're okay as long as it's somewhat dry. It doesn't have to be 100% dry if you're using thicker paint. If you're going to go over with thin washes with a lot of water, then we would really let this dry completely before we would start doing that, because then that can be a problem. It'll make odd looking marks on the paper and so forth. So we're going to keep going here, and we'll get some interesting colors with some. We're going to use some gold, which is yellow ochre, peacock blue, and yellow ochre here. And then we can go with sap green over here. We're going to get definitely a mix of nice greens. We can add a little bit of burnt sienna. All right, so that's pretty good. We can even use some, we'll use some burnt umber over here, and some French ultramarine blue for our darker shadow colors, the darks here. So we have dark shadowing colors, burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna. Now that can be for our darker colors. And then we can just go in and kind of touch, just go around and do like little, pretend we just lightly touching the paper, and we can do some darker darks here and there. Then once we do that, we can rinse our brush off really well, and then we can get into some of the lighter greens and golds here. And that's going to tend to be up above. The darks are going to be lower. So the darks are the shadowy colors, those are underneath, and then these lighter colors are going to be on the upper side of the foliage. So we do this. And we can mix in some cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon yellow. So what we're doing is we're getting lots of interesting variations of colors. Some splashes, and we're going to do splashes for the sand as well. We're also going to sort of some of the plants and things, they grow on the hill, so it almost like a sweeping effect. Like that, going upwards. Some more shadow colors here like that. Sap green, olive green, and we'll use some yellow ochre. You can turn your brush sideways like this and get some interesting effects like that too. And then we can add in some blue for shadowing colors too as well, some purple, mineral violet. So now we'll do some shadowing underneath these areas here. That always looks good, some shadowing. So the sunlight's coming from the top essentially. And let's put some more shadowing here and there. And now we'll take our needlepoint brush for some more added detail, and we'll mix our maybe some dark, like the French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, burnt umber, maybe a little sap green in there too, and we can make just some ideas of some twigs. Let's make them sort of in one direction, although I always have noticed that in a lot of paintings I've seen, a lot of times most artists, watercolor artists, and oil painters too as well, and the old masters, and they usually, everything tends to go in one direction. Like if you're going to paint and make branches and trees and things, it's usually, they all kind of flow in one direction. So it's kind of like a pleasant look to have everything sort of swaying in this one direction. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to just do some interesting grasses and twigs. Let them go like that, just happy and free, going this way. And maybe one or two maybe are straight, and then maybe, but we're all trying to keep these going this like that. And then we can take our green, sap green, a little bit of peacock blue, and maybe some cobalt blue in there too. And we're gonna try to get some interesting so these here, we're going to just do a couple palmettos, but we want to leave some we want to definitely leave really some cool, interesting, some light, bright white paper in here. So we always want to try to leave that bright white paper in there, in sections here and there. And that gives us the feeling of the sand, the sand dune. And if we covered everything with green plants and grasses and twigs and all that, that would be a problem, because we definitely want to leave some of that white in there. So let's leave that white paper in there. Same with here. And then, since we have this pretty good, this section here, we don't want to, another great thing we can do when we're doing a painting like this is, once we have things pretty good over here, we could do a little more, but let's kind of leave it underfinished and then move to a different area of the painting so that we don't get too overly focused on one spot and then do like, a zillion things there, and then we'll forget about the other parts of the painting. So let's leave this the way it is here. It looks pretty good. Might be able to do some more there, but let's move over to here. Let's do a couple olive green, sap green, yellow ochre, and some interesting and we'll do a little more of that peacock blue and yellow ochre. That's a good balance right there. All right, and then we're going to do our shadowy color. Mineral violet, purple color, cobalt blue. And if we wanted to, we can also make even a darker shadowy color with some French ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. Okay, looking good. And let's Mix up a darker greens, sap green, olive green, a little bit of some burnt sienna. And we'll do some grasses here. That looks pretty good. So we'll use some burnt umber. This is some raw umber, raw sienna. And then we'll do some sand feel. We could do some of that cadmium lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. We can mix that in here, a little bit here and there. It gives it that really bright sunlight feel, adding that little touch of the cadmium yellows. And again, my brush strokes here are kind of all with that flowing feel of the sand and we're sort of really getting a real good finished feel to this now. I think we're gonna and I wanted to just sort of blend that in here. Okay, now let's, if we can we'll use some thicker paint here. So some cobalt blue. Cobalt blue, maybe a little bit of Viridian green, cobalt blue, French ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna. And let's okay, we put a little bit of a darker wash there, very thin line. Then we'll go underneath it and kind of thin it out a little bit there. Maybe a little bit of the green. Then we'll give a feel of waves. So we leave the white paper there. So I'm just skipping, doing basically thin lines, leaving white paper between each of those blue lines. And that gives you the feeling of the waves. And I think a little bit of splashing. And then I would make this a darker out in the distance where the horizon is on the ocean. I would make this a darker blue. I'd dry off my brush a little bit, make up a dark blue, French ultramarine blue, some burnt umber, make up a dark blue there, maybe a little bit of green in there too. Then we dry off our brush quite a bit and then roll it around and get a nice point. Like that. And then we can just and so you know, we did some of this viridian green here. That looks good in the closer areas of the water. That suggests a little bit, you know, that the water is not as deep. So we have the thinner bit of water here is the viridian green, and then as we go back, the blue gets darker, the ocean gets deeper, it gets darker. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's we'll touch up a few spots. It's always good sometimes to, when we finish up our paintings, to let them dry a little bit. Maybe the next day we can come back and do a few touch-up spots we might see. I think a lot of times the key is not to overwork too much. I used to overwork my paintings a lot. I would, you know, work like 2-3 hours on one painting this size, and what would happen is I would just put so much detail into it that it would just look like way too much information, or, you know, just tons and tons of different things. And it's sometimes simplicity is definitely a great thing when it comes to artwork. Although, again, you're the artist, you create your paintings the way you want to. You might like a ton of details, and that's fine too. So, but for me, I like to sometimes underfinish a little bit. But, you know, you're the artist, you decide what, you know, when you think your painting is finished, and if you need to add any more details to it. It can't hurt to stop a little bit sooner with, you know, with not as much detail, because you can always add details. But obviously when we're doing watercolors, we can't really, it's very difficult to like remove different things, you know, like if you have a bush or branches or things like that, you know, to try to remove it from the painting would be very difficult. So usually that would just be when we start another painting, and we wouldn't worry about trying to work on it too much. But there are ways to fix, you know, little spots here and there. Maybe adding just a little bit of water with the brush, and then blotting it up with a tissue if there's certain spots that, you know, might not look great. I think the only thing I would do different here on this painting would be I would have gone a lot lighter with these pencil lines, because in this painting I think it would look better without the pencil lines. I really enjoy pencil lines most all times when I'm drawing and painting, but in this type of painting it would seem like it would look probably better if I went with a really, maybe just a real, something like this. Something that you can just barely see, but I would see it as I'm painting, so that I know to kind of have my borders of where the different sand dunes are and things like that. But for the most part, this is pretty good. And we'll just peel off the tape, and we can see that it looks like a really nice finished painting here. You know, that feel of the ocean and the sunlight on the sand, and just a real enjoyable amounts of good colors, the nice greens and golds and blues. All right, so I hope everyone enjoyed this, and I hope you try this. You can try it a couple different times. You can maybe add in some things, you know. You can add in some figures if you want, maybe walking on the beach here and there, or in the water. There's a lot of fun stuff with this type of painting where you can add some things in that might look really interesting. Maybe a boat on the water, things like that. A fun painting to do though, and pretty simple too. You know, we just started off with our light washes to start with, and then we just went in and did our, you know, our grasses and twigs and bushes and things along the sand dunes here, and we had a fun time. So again, thanks for stopping by and painting, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.